Jane, welcome to Berlin, and thank you for coming. I have prepared a few questions about you and about your professional life, and I would like to start with asking you a little bit more about your professional life. So, where you're coming from, and how you got involved with osteopathy to start with, before going into your more specific areas.
I'm quite by accident in osteopathy. It's a very long story which I cannot make in less
have
than
enough time
10 minutes. But I read something incorrectly, and I thought osteopathy, according to this gentleman that I was reading, was fantastic, and I finished the program. And then I had invited a couple of guests from England to a conference, and they were talking at a table, and I could hear them talking about this book that I had read. And I said, "Oh, that's the reason I'm in osteopathy." And they looked at me like, "What?" I said, "What's wrong?" That man hated osteopathy.
So that's how you got into.
That's how I got into, because of this book.
Because of this book.
So I obviously read it incorrectly.
So you're not going to tell us which book that was?
I can tell you, sure.
Yeah.
James Syriac's.
Okay. Good.
Yeah, but before that I was a sports therapist.
You were a sports therapist. Yeah. Okay. And since then you have been practicing osteopathy?
Yeah, exclusively.
Yeah. Exclusively. So you are obviously very well known as we could maybe say a historian.
Yes.
Yes. And how did you get all this interest, particularly into A.T. Still's life?
I took a fascia course as a student, and I said, maybe I'll just go check what Andrew Taylor Still says about the fascia as a reference. And I started to read it, and it didn't make any sense at all. Yeah, words I never heard of, concepts that weren't taught. So I said, who am I going to listen to? The teacher or the founder? But it was really hard to read and difficult, so I made that my thesis, which took a long time to prepare, but that's how I got into it.
Yeah, and that's where we met. In 2005 in Keksri, you were preparing your thesis and you were working on the fascia.
I was done my thesis then, so I must have been back just doing some additional work. And that's the next question is, did you, since you've published your work on A.T. Still's fascia, did you come up with new things about fascia over the last years, or did you pursue the questions about fascia? Oh, I did. I went both ways. I went more history and more fascia.
Okay.
And the fascia, primarily, I had the opportunity to dissect freshly killed animals. So the fascia is half an hour old at the most. And that happens a couple of times a year in hunting season. So I'm always looking at some new aspect and trying to verify perhaps something I've read about it.
Okay. But this is something you're doing in a more practical way, let's say, like cutting and looking at the structures or the fascial structures.
Yeah.
I was thinking,
and playing and.
Yeah, no, I was thinking more. Did you look at historically, at other historical aspects of fascia from osteopathy or from the old osteopathic days?
Oh, sure. I mean, I made that book chapter in the new fascia book on the history of fascia in osteopathy. So, yes, I've done that.
Yeah, so you came up eventually with some new ideas and things. Are you looking at new historical ideas?
Constantly.
Constantly? Is there something that is kind of fascinating you most at the moment?
Well, I have 3 or 4 uncompleted books. Mm-hmm. So one's on the history of osteopathy, one's on Andrew Taylor Still, one's on Little John, and one's on Sutherland. Okay. And they're all in different stages of, when do I have time? Yeah.
Yes. Can you briefly explain us, and I think we share the same idea, on why the history of osteopathy should help us in our daily practice? A lot of students, the reason I'm asking you this is that a lot of students don't understand the importance of history. They just think it's a very boring subject. And we have both been lecturing history of osteopathy for many years, and we know that it is important. Yeah. Could you maybe summarize why, going back into the times is so important for our daily current practice?
Well, first of all, for students, you can't tell a student that history is important. It's like you can't tell a kid why brushing their teeth is important. They only figure that out when they didn't brush their teeth and they have to pay for their own dental work, right? So to try and tell somebody history is important is almost impossible. So you have to try to come alive and make it interesting. But what I think the number one thing why I find history important right now is everything of importance and all the approaches that we could use to treat the sick people were taught and done up until about 1900. When the faculty broke up in 1900, then that tradition of treating sick and teaching how to treat sick people was lost. And that's where our potential lies in treating sick people, because as we discussed I don't know if you were there on Thursday with Mike Katura, anybody can treat sore people. Doesn't have to be an osteopath, but that's what we've come down to, just treating sore people. 50% of the cases are usually low back pain. So
yeah.
Then I can be a sports therapist, I can be a kinesiologist, I can be whatever.
Of course, yeah. Do you see any future in this for osteopathy, in going back into this traditional approach? How is it in Canada?
Yes, because I've also done recently a master's degree in pharmacology research. So I can say from a position of power that these pills are not our friends. They're really not our friends. And certainly in life-saving conditions, you need them, but they're just overprescribed and they're marketed. They're creating conditions to convince you that you have a condition that you need a pill for, because they have nothing in the pipeline. So osteopathy as an alternative to pharmacological supplements or therapy, or at least to enhance the metabolism and excretion of the pharmacological products, is probably a way into the future.
Mm-hmm. How is the situation in Canada concerning osteopathy? Do you think it's going in the right way, or are you concentrating on treating sore people?
Both. But when you say the situation in Canada, you have to know it's
complicated.
Very complicated, because we also
in your
reality,
reality, I mean, you don't have to go through the whole Canadian politics.
Can't.
You can't, I know. But in your reality, from what you see in your surroundings,
I think they're more going with pediatrics, gynecology, obstetrics, headaches, but not really systemic illnesses.
Systemic illnesses. Okay.
No.
So there's maybe a little window, but
I
not.
hope.
Mm-hmm. Just to finish off our conversation, do you have any suggestions for future research that might help osteopathy the way you see our profession evolving?
I have big ideas.
Okay.
Because, and I think where we have to go is actually validating our hands as instruments of measurement. So that when we say we feel something, there's no doubt about it. Mm-hmm. And right now, we can't, even if you nail a cadaver down to a board, you can't be consistently saying where the IS is, right? So once we can have a set of stations where you come in, how cold is it, how hot is it, how big is it, how heavy is it, how viscous is it, what position is it in, how much is it rotated, how much is it moving, rubber stamp, measuring tool. Measuring tool, and when you say we have a rotated vertebrae, there's no question. Right now, you can publish all this stuff where you had a C5 or a rib or translated, but with what are we measuring it with? You can't just say because I know or because that's what I found. it's not going to get outside of the osteopathic circles. Published it, right? So that's my interest in the area.
Interested in the area, yeah. Thank you, Jane,
Okay.
for participating. Thank you for the interview.